Who is Knull, the god of the symbiotes? What do we know about him and Venom's origins? And could Knull be the main villain for a Spider-Man 4? We know that the symbiote, commonly referred to as the Venom symbiote, has a long and illustrious career from a homeworld complete with other symbiotes just like him. This planet has its own community and a culture, and over years, multiple different symbiotes have been showcased across the comics. In the trailer for Venom: The Last Dance, it's revealed that Venom's homeworld found him, and that several other symbiotes will be making Earthfall when Venom 3 arrives in theaters. Not only did it hint at one of the symbiote's most fearsome predators, but it confirmed the inclusion of Knull, the Dark God and the creator of the Clintar. So let's dive straight into what we know about Knull, where he comes from, and why he may have no variants in the multiverse. The symbiotes originally hailed from a world known as Clintar, which is actually an artificial planet located deep within the uncharted sector of space. Over the years, its location has been discovered by a very select few beings. The origin of the Clintar can actually be traced back directly to Knull, the eldritch god of eternal darkness, and the very same god who created the symbiotes in the first place. Initially, Knull lived in the time between universes, after the destruction of the 6th cosmos and before the age of the 7th, reigning over his kingdom of darkness. At the dawn of the 7th cosmos, the Celestials began to breathe light and light into the world, encroaching on Knull's domain, and this infuriated the ancient god. In response, Knull crafted a living sword with which he fought back against the Celestials, even decapitating one of them with the Necrosword, otherwise known as the first symbiote. In creating the sword, Knull discovered a template for which he could mold an entire kingdom of living weapons that grew in power over time. These warriors and minions were given sentience, and from the fabric of raw, untethered darkness, Knull breathed life into the void of nothingness, and created the symbiotes. Even though he lost the sword soon after, the science led to the creation of other symbiotes and symbiotic assistants, crafted quite literally out of the primordial darkness that predated the universe itself. Knull took his fleet of symbiote dragons and immediately sought to snuff out all the light in the surrounding reaches, casting Clintar into eternal darkness by eliminating all stars and sources of life from the abyss surrounding the world of Clintar. This meant that he devoured entire civilizations and massacred the respective gods of these communities in order to make the Clintar prosper as his kingdom of darkness. But just because he created the symbiotes did not mean that they agreed with all of his methods. After Knull's rampages and various genocides, the symbiotes began to learn concepts from these people that they had plundered, including notions of honor, nobility, and honesty. As a result, they eventually cast Knull out, staging a rebellion in order to imprison their god within the heart of the symbiote homeworld. After he was defeated, they adopted the symbiote word for cage to refer to both themselves and their planet, and that word was Clintar. There were dissenting voices to Knull's plans before the symbiotes turned on their leader. When he had full support of his creations, only one was known for speaking out against Knull, the single Clintar, who would later become known as Venom. In Venom Volume 4, number 35, he is exiled for his opinions on Knull, and he later found himself on Battleworld during the events of Secret Wars, which is the first time in the comics that Venom came into contact with Peter Parker. In the Venom films, he refers to himself as a bit of a loser by the collective, so it's unclear as to whether or not the reason that he left is the same in the movies as it is in the original source material of the comics, and if Venom actually spoke out against Knull. In the comics, Venom wasn't a loser so much as he was a traitor, and a deviant whose inability to take command from the hive mind got him into big trouble. In the Venom trailer, we learned that the symbiotes who landed on Earth weren't thrown out accidentally, but instead, they were running from something, and the indication seems to be that they were trying to get away from Knull. If this is the case, then it would mean that Knull still had the overwhelming support of most symbiotes at this point in the timeline, and can direct his minions wherever he wants them once he finds where the defectors have run off to, in this case, Earth. After imprisoning him, however, Clintar began to manifest its own ecosystem, with a rocky crust and a symbiotic foliage, one that let it finally begin to resemble a truly organic planet. Their prosperity, however, would not last, as deep within the bellows of their planet, Knull began to stir, until eventually he was able to reform the hive mind and bend the remainder of the Clintar to his will. He destroyed the planet that had been constructed around him, and used his own symbiote army throughout the remainder of his conquest. The rest of the Clintar, however, seem to have made their way to Earth, or at least a hefty portion of his comrades, Clintar that come from Knull's original throne world. So what other symbiotes could we see in opposition to Knull? It's a bit unclear, but one particular monstrous creature in the trailer seems to resemble what is known as a Xenophage. The Xenophage are actually Clintar, but a species known for feeding on symbiotes. They have the power to paralyze and immobilize symbiotes so that it can feast on their power, making each symbiote little more than dead weight to its host before the Xenophage consumes both of them. If this is truly an adaptation of the Xenophage, then it may imply that there is a much broader conflict going on between the Clintar and this race of Xenophage that Earth is simply caught in the middle of. But the creature from the trailer does not behave like a Xenophage would. In the comics, they're not heralds of Knull, but in this film, it seems like these will be his minions sent at Knull's behest, so we may be seeing an adaptation where the Xenophage are actually symbiotes that Knull has created and are being sent after Venom. We know that they won't be the only villains in Venom: The Last Dance. We are also set to see the debut of Toxin, which was first set up at the end of Let There Be Carnage. In the films, just like the comics, Toxin was the offspring of the Carnage symbiote, who in turn was spawned from Venom, making Toxin akin to Venom's grandchild. Since he was the 1000th symbiote in the direct lineage, it was feared by both Venom and Carnage alike that Toxin would be the most powerful of their entire bloodline, second only to the dark god Knull himself. The movie also shows us that it will yet again be Patrick Mulligan to host the Toxin symbiote, and at the beginning of their time together, they actually attempted to act as heroes. In the original source material of the comics, Venom and Carnage were very much both villains, whereas Tom Hardy's version of the character is something more of an anti-hero, and it was Toxin's attempt to be a hero that actually turned them against their heir. In Venom vs. Carnage number 4, it was revealed that the Toxin symbiote is in fact strong enough to hold its own against both Venom and Carnage at the same time. And it's important to remember that just one of these symbiotes on their own is enough to keep Spider-Man busy. Handling both at once is no easy feat. In the movie, Toxin is likely going to be far more violent, which may be driven by his morbid sense of humor and his affinity for aggressive action. When Mulligan first bonded with the symbiote, he had to rein in some of his darker questions, which largely came from a place of genuine curiosity and not an outright sense of malice from Toxin. The Toxin symbiote had a dark fascination with more morbid topics, and this led to a compelling mentorship arc where Mulligan actually tried to teach the symbiote how to be a more noble hero and not give in to violent impulses. During their growth, his attempt to teach the symbiote the value of human life actually left a lasting impact on him, long after he parted ways with Mulligan. So Toxin is a bit more morally ambiguous, even more so than Venom. With that said, the beginning of this arc could make sense for Toxin being more of a villain, while still holding true to the nature and the personality of the character, but it seems like Toxin may end up taking a backseat to Knull. Knull is a character who has been left on the sidelines for far too long in terms of the cinematic representation, and if this is truly meant to be Venom's final film, then it makes sense that Sony is setting up one final power play to truly distinguish itself from the MCU. We know that Sony's universe of Spider-Man characters has been hit or miss to say the least, so we do have to wonder exactly what their plan is for Knull, and if he will be done justice in live action. Could join the MCU with the release of Spider-Man 4, but set between Avengers Doomsday and Avengers Secret Wars. As Knull is a being that was born outside of the cosmos and resided there, it is actually possible that he doesn't have any variants in the multiverse, but we'll touch more on that in a later video. But anyway guys, what do you think of the Venom 3 trailer? And is Knull being set up for a major villain down the line? Also, do you think the creature hunting Venom is a Xenophage? And what are your thoughts on their origins and the origin of the Clintar? Stay tuned on the channel for more Venom content, as we'll be breaking down everything from Knull to Spider-Man 4. Hulk smash that subscribe button for more Marvel lore, and have a great day.